Hi guys, I'm here with Dicken, as you can see. Dicken and I are having a conversation about silence and about the principles, and Dicken again is just spitting wisdom, as the cool kids say. So I thought I'd love to record this and share it with you in the lead up to the immersion. Dickon was saying silence is, you're saying it's a principle of consciousness. You're talking about consciousness, and I was saying that I felt it was like the principle of mind, and I'll let you carry on.
When you point toward the principles, you're pointing toward the essential nature of life. You're pointing toward the formless energy that creates everything in life. So you can only use metaphors to point in that direction. And a lot of times people, when they talk about silence, use it in contrast to, say, a busy mind. But there's a way of talking about silence as a metaphor for our essential nature, for our core. That, in that sense, silence can be used as a metaphor to point toward what Sid Banks would call pure consciousness. So here's my take on that. Here's my take. Inside of all of us, always, is pure consciousness. It's our soul. It's the essence of our being. It's our center, if you will. Pure consciousness is awareness. It's pure means it's free of the distortion and limitation of our conceptual mind. And if you want, we could go into that. But it's just, there's a space inside of all of us that's always there, underneath or behind our personal thinking, our ideas, our beliefs, and our concepts. And when people fall out of their personal thinking and ideas and beliefs and concepts, you could say they fall into a space of pure awareness or silence. That silence is always there. You can't create it. You can't make your mind silent. It is silent. The metaphor I've used many times before is, if you're on the surface of the ocean, you don't have to try and silence the waves. So I don't advise people to try and silence their minds. When you realize that there's this dimension within us, within everybody, and everybody during the day falls into that. Sometimes Sid Banks would call that the now. The now is the present moment, free of the influence of your conceptual mind. And everybody I know falls into that state, but they don't realize the significance of it or the importance of it. They don't tend to look there when they're having difficulty or suffering. So as you begin to, in the ocean, if you go a foot below the surface, it's quieter. And that quiet always existed there. So it's not a matter of trying to get yourself to stop thinking or trying to think positive or trying to think a better way. It's relaxing into the moment as it is. And the experience of that is silence. It's just presence. It's just, there isn't all the noise and babble of your self-talk. It's like you're in a party and you're in the room with all the people and it's really noisy and loud and everybody is talking and you have all these voices in your head, and then you step into the backyard of the house and it's quiet there. And it's always been quiet there. Well, I guess it depends on where your backyard is. Cush's backyard is the airport. It may not be silent. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. So then silence is powerful. It's in a sense what everybody is looking for, because it's only when we step into the now or into silence that we then automatically begin to feel better and get a higher quality of thinking. In other words, the intelligence of mind reveals itself. It breaks through human consciousness as feelings that uplift or thinking that's helpful when our minds are relaxed and open and quiet. It's a guarantee. It's a guarantee. So it's been very interesting to me that most people, when they're having difficulty or a problem or feel stressed or upset, they don't fall out of their personal thinking into silence. They lean into their thinking and think about what's going on and try and figure it out.
So Dicken, there are a number of people who are coming to this immersion who have been to previous, 1, 2, 3 or more immersions. I've been pointing, as you've been pointing me to this, I've been pointing people to silence. And forget anyone else, I forget, right? Like, I forget this. And so is it just a case of reminding ourselves about this space, and over time, the more we spend in silence, the more normal it becomes, because yes, this space is always there, and yet what's normal is that we're in this busy mind, we're in this noisy environment all the time, we're a noisy thinking all the time, and I know I would love to have a quieter mind more often. I'm sure a lot of the guys coming would like to have a quieter mind more often, because when we spend time in that space, we do see the impact of it.
Yes, that's right. A lot of people. Another metaphor for silence is peace, because when we drop out of our conceptual mind, there is no judgments, there's no shoulds, there's no improvement, there's no better, there's no time. All of those are created from concepts and ideas. When we fall into the eternal now or the timeless now, there's a freedom from the restrictions of our conceptual mind, and there's also this experience of being at ease or at peace or contentment. So when I feel discontent, restless, stressed, tense, I know I'm not in the now. And the now is the cure for all of those things. Right? It's just, for me, the now or silence is one of the 3 doorways into well-being. Thought is a doorway into well-being. Consciousness is a doorway into well-being. Mind is a doorway into the well-being. That's any one of the 3 principles can lead you home. Any one of the 3 principles can lead you home. So this is why I talk about all 3, because any one of those 3 can lead you into this space that's free of the limitation of our conditioned thinking. And plain and simple fact is that human beings operate their best when they're in that space. Whether it's in sports, whether it's in business, whether it's in personal relationships, any kind of relationship. When we fall out of the noise of our own personal thinking into this silent presence, that's when we listen the best, that's when we have the best thinking, that's the only place you can find positive feelings, so that's where we feel the best. So at this point, we're just talking about one of the three principles and a way of practically beginning to understand what pure consciousness is to gain a deeper understanding and experience of the silence of our mind. Pure awareness, pure presence, just being quietly awake to the moment as it is. Nothing to figure out, nothing to understand intellectually. You can't think your way into silence. No one can. You can't think and be happy. Try it. When you're happy, you stop holding on to your personal thinking. You can't love and think at the same time.
But doesn't happiness and love arise from our thinking?
No, they don't arise from our thinking. They arise from mind. They arise from this formless energy. That's the only place anything is created. Anything.
So I thought thought and feeling were the different sides of the same coin.
Thinking content and feeling content are different sides of the same coin. There's something deeper than content. Thought is formless creative energy. Consciousness is formless creative energy. Mind is formless creative energy. I was talking to a woman the other day who had been studying the principles for a whole year, and she had been taught that thinking creates feeling, and so she assumed it was our thinking content creating feeling, as if content has the power to create. So when she was unhappy, she was very interested in what she was thinking, because she had to find that out to know why she was feeling the way she was feeling. Thought is the power to create. It's a principle. Thought creates our thinking. Thinking can't create anything. Thought creates our thinking. Consciousness brings thinking alive as experience. Thought content can't create. Anything that's created doesn't have the power to create. So to realize that my feelings are created from thought points me right back to this quiet source that creates everything. That's why Sid says, don't be concerned about thinking content. Be interested in the fact that you think, the fact that you have experience. That is being created from the same place that creates all of life. If we think our thinking has the power to create, then anything in the world to form would have the power to create. And then we'd say, well, that car just made me mad. We're pointing towards something that's already created and saying it has the power to create. And that's been the misunderstanding that's been around for centuries. People, when you ask people, why are you feeling the way they do, they point towards something that's already been created as the source of their feeling. It's impossible.
Can I go?
It's not scientific. Yeah. It's not scientific.
So can I go deeper with that? Because I'd say some people see that, okay, it's not outside me. I can't feel anything that's outside me, right? It's inside out. We've heard these sayings, right?
Yes, yes.
But I'd love to explore this whole thing about content can't create content. The thinking can't create anything, because I know when I speak to clients, and maybe I've been guilty of this myself, is that sometimes it's like, oh, I'm feeling like this, right? And that's because I have a certain belief, or I'm having certain thinking. And it feels difficult sometimes for people to change that, right? It's like, well, I believe I'm not good enough, therefore I feel bad, right? Or
Yeah.
I feel like this should be this way, or I feel like that person should be that way, therefore I'm feeling like this. And they can find it quite difficult to get out of that trap.
It's very interesting. People get out of that trap constantly and they don't know it. In other words, the instant you stop thinking about it, those thoughts disappear, the trap disappears, the feeling disappears. As soon as you get present, as soon as you fall into the now, all of the things that are problematic in your life, all of the habits of thinking are not being created at that point. You fall into an unconditioned state. It's the simplest thing in the world. The principles point toward what's obvious and what's true. And it's always true, and it's always been true. We just don't realize it. So we think it's hard to get out of a habit of thought. It's the easiest thing in the world. I've seen people completely embroiled in a habit of thought, feeling horrible. And they say, Dicken, it's too hard. I don't get this. I don't see how thought can be helpful. And I say, okay, listen to me and I'll explain to you how this works. I'll explain to you the secret to all of this. And they stop thinking about things and they just listen. And I said, I thought you said it was hard. You just stepped out of your thinking and it stopped. He said, when you're listening, what are you feeling? And I guarantee it's not the same thing they were feeling when they were caught up in their thoughts. It's not hard. It's like if you're in the ocean saying, oh, it's so hard to quiet this ocean down. And I say, okay, hold your breath for a second, go down a foot. What do you experience? Oh, it's quiet here. Well, you were looking for quiet where it doesn't exist. You can't find quiet in your personal thinking. You can't think your way to quiet. But every human being is a thought away from disengaging from whatever thought they're thinking. Is called the now. It's called silence. It's called pure consciousness. How's that hit?
Deep. Yeah. I love that analogy, and it's like, yeah, we all do it so soon. We all do it so quickly. We do it all the time.
Very, very quickly. Let's say you were caught in a habit of thinking and worrying like crazy, and somebody came and said, your house is on fire, your apartment is on fire. How long do you think it would take to get out of that thinking?
Yeah, no time at all. No time at all.
No time at all. That's one of the greatest discoveries, is that we have free will and we're free thinkers. And at any moment, we can disengage from what we're thinking about and fall into the now. Because the now is the only place that doesn't require effort. You can't try and be in the now. You can't try and get quiet. It's when you can only be present. You can't become present. You can only be happy. You can't become happy. It's not a matter of thinking your way to those places. They already exist. You already have them. You already are them. And when you just relax, that's what's there. When we relax into the now, our personal thinking falls away, and with it, all of our judgments and problems and issues and concerns. Now we're just in the now. You say, well, how can I deal with life or my problems when I'm in the now? Well, that's when we're actually at our best. That's when we get insight and inspiration and new thinking and responsive thinking. Right? I played football, soccer for many, many years. And when I would fall out of my personal thinking, I didn't become passive and not deal with what was happening. It was really easy for me. We call that being in the zone. When people are in the zone, they're in that silence. They're in that pure consciousness. They're right there. Boom. Very responsive. Wisdom then lives us and responds us and helps us deal with whatever is going on.
I can see how this applies across the board. A lot of guys that come to these immersion events, seemingly on the outside, have very different issues or problems or challenges or goals. For someone it might be about career, for someone else it might be about their marriage or the relationship, for someone else it might be the relationship to themselves, and or to another human being, and what I've been saying all this time is that, I call these the powerful men's immersions because our true source of power is inside. And what I'm hearing from you today is that as we enter that space of silence, which can be so quick, we're in that. We're tapping into that wisdom and that power. And that's across the board.
That's right, across the board. It's automatic. If any human being touches that space of pure thought that's before the influence of concepts and ideas, it has to create something beautiful within us. We start to feel better and we start to think better. It's a given. There's a science to this. It's when any human being falls beyond the influence of all their personal thinking, when they fall into the now, in that moment, they respond better to life and they start to feel better. They get thinking that's more responsive as opposed to conditioned and reactive. It's an enormous freedom. Silence or this quiet space or pure consciousness, Sid called the ultimate answer. It's where human beings will find every single thing that they're looking for, and nobody looks there when they're having difficulty or are stressed. Not nobody, but you can just observe when people are having difficulty. Are they falling into the now and resting in that silent, open, aware space of pure listening, just listening to life? Or are they busy trying to figure something out? And the simple truth is, it's always been true, is that no human being can use their intellect to think their way to the things that really matter for humans. We're given this computer. We weren't ever intended to try and use the computer to find love or wisdom. You can't find love or understanding in a computer. You can find information, you can process information. That's the purpose of it. But when we're born into a preconceptual state. And then we have to develop our computer capacity, our conceptual mind. We have to. It's necessary and helpful and useful, and it's a beautiful thing. But you can't find love and understanding in your conceptual mind. No one can. And the paradox is, when people fall out of their conceptual mind, they start feeling more loving and more understanding, no matter what's going on.
So just bringing it back to a pragmatic thing then, Dicken, let's say someone's having an issue with a colleague, right? They're at work and there's someone in the office, and then maybe it's their boss, maybe it's a colleague, maybe it's someone who works for them,
yeah.
And they can't stand this person, right? And they stop thinking about them, they come back to silence, they're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every time they meet them, they still get riled up. What does someone do on a practical, pragmatic, day-to-day basis? Say they're struggling with someone else, or maybe even a situation that they come back to silence and they feel better, but then they come back to that personal situation and they're still like, Ah,
Because that's why we have to talk about the principle of thought. The only reason they come back to it over and over and over again is they think that their upset feeling has to do with the boss. So they keep thinking about the boss all the time, and that thinking makes them miserable, the way they think about it. It's a misunderstanding about what feelings are and where they come from. So if you see, my dislike for my boss has nothing to do with my boss. It's coming from within. It's created from my own thinking. It's not being created by my boss. He has no power to create anything. Oh, could you imagine? Can you imagine if you and I had the power to create feelings in people? We could just walk around. We'd be like magicians. We could make them feel anything we wanted to. It doesn't work that way. It's never worked that way. People feel their own, whatever is created from the power of thought is what they're going to feel. It comes from within.
so bringing it back
So
to
when
the
you
example.
realize that, that happened to me, once I realized that my upset at my boss was coming from my own thinking. It was created from the power of thought. It wasn't created by my boss. Suddenly, I start letting go of a lot of the thinking I was doing about my stupid boss, because that thinking was just making me miserable. Why would I do that to myself? Why would I keep thinking about something that makes me miserable? See, the instant people see that it's thought creating experience, they let go of. It's built into us to let go of what's creating our pain. If you think our boss is creating our pain, you don't let go of the thinking that's actually creating your pain. If you know it's thought creating your pain, you let go of everything you're thinking, and you fall into silence then. And it's a beautiful, you fall into listening, you fall into presence. And then you're free of all of that thinking that torments you. And you're free of the misunderstanding that your boss has anything to do with what you're feeling. This is a radical psychology. Radical psychology is things in the world we've believed and been taught our whole life create our feelings, and they don't. They never have. It's not scientific. It doesn't work that way. It's never worked that way. It never will work that way. You have a boss yell at 10 people, and one person goes, I love how strong my boss is. I like working for a boss who's demanding. You get another person who says, why does he have to yell? I hate that he yells. I hate that he yells. So they feel hate. Somebody else feels admiration. Somebody else feels neutral. Somebody else feels frightened. Somebody else feels compassionate for this poor guy who's suffering so much. The boss doesn't create feelings. Thought is the source of all of our feelings. It's a radical psychology, but it's the only thing that sets us free because it actually works that way.
So what I'm hearing from you, Dicken, is I guess the underlying thing, I'm trying to put myself in someone else's shoes, that if they're struggling with a certain situation or person, if they then try and get away from that situation or person because I can't see clearly, I need to get away, that's still misunderstanding. And what you're saying is that when it doesn't work that way, so it makes no sense to get away from a situation or person because they can't make you feel anything, and we're creating the problem ourselves. So for example, if you think the boss is causing you to feel upset, and then you go, let me go and find a nicer boss, that's a problem that doesn't exist.
Yes. It's a strategy born from, if the world causes you to feel bad, you either fight to change that world so that you can feel happy, or you run away from that, what you think is the source of your unhappiness. When the misunderstanding gets cleared up and we fall out of all of that misunderstanding and all of the thinking that goes along with it, our wisdom will take us either toward our boss or away from our boss. But it's now coming from wisdom. It's not coming from an ego strategy. So I don't know. I mean, if you have a boss who yells and screams and is negative all the time, it doesn't mean you can't be at peace with yourself or enjoy your work or enjoy what you do. But in that clarity and in that perspective, you may decide, well, I can continue working here because I love what I'm doing and the boss doesn't really affect me that much. Or your wisdom can say, I feel inclined to go to a different workplace that's healthier. Who knows? You never know where wisdom is going to take you. But it'll take you right where you need to go. But understanding the principles is what sets you free from the misunderstandings that causes suffering.
Thank you for that, Dicken. I'm gonna stop the video there, and we'll try and do a few more of these before we get to the immersion.
Okay.